you so much for joining me for Festival Motifs. I'm Camille, the resident henna artist here at FreeHandMehndi. In today's class, we're going to learn how to apply all sorts of really fun, creative designs from the ebook Festival Motifs by Aisha. So let's go ahead and get started. Before we get started, I'm going to talk about the different materials that I'm going to use in the class. I'm going to use a henna cone, but you can use an applicator bottle or any other type of applicator that you prefer to use. It's all personal preference. My personal preference is to use a small, short, skinny cone, but you can use a long, wide cone if you'd like to do that. Just find what works best for you. A pair of scissors to cut the tip of my cone. A copy of Festival Motifs, the ebook. Now, if you purchase the class at freehandmehndi.com, you should have a copy of this ebook. And a laminated template to work on. If you don't have a laminated template to work on, that's okay. You can use a sheet of paper or a piece of plastic. So let's go ahead and get started with the first design. Hey everyone, the very first design that we're going to get started with is this one. This should be on the very first page of the ebook that you've printed out. You can number the pages any way you like, but I went ahead and chose this as the first design we're going to do. I'm going to show the other designs on the page so you know which one that we're working from. Okay, so this is the first one that we're going to do. We're going to start with this flower here, sort of to lay out the design. First, let's start with this very simple circle. You want to keep even pressure as you apply the circle. If you stop and start, worried about the perfection of your circle, you'll see bumps and lumps in the henna design itself. So it's always important to keep even pressure as you go all the way around. And if you find that you want to fix something, just go ahead and trace over the circle again and fill in where you think that some extra henna paste is needed. There is a crisscross on the inside of the flower, so we're just going to lay some lines in one direction across. The reason why we're only going to do one direction of lines initially is because it gives some time for these lines to stiffen a little bit, just to dry a little bit. If you lay down crisscross lines over the top of each other in both directions, sometimes you'll find that the designs will bleed together and it doesn't really look like a crisscross. Let's go ahead and start with the next part, which is just a second circle that traces the one that's directly in the middle. Again, keeping even pressure, and if you see you want to correct something in that circle, just go ahead and retrace it. Next is gingerbread. Let's just have circles. The base connects to that flower there. You can apply gingerbread the way it works best for you. Some people just like to work around the circle itself, one motion repetitively. I find that I like to stop and start in different sections and put my gingerbread in, but that's just my personal preference. There's no right or wrong way to lay down gingerbread in a design. And next we're going to start adding some petals. Now the petals have dark, thick caps, but they have very thin sides. So we're going to start with light pressure here, working our way up. We're going to thicken the pressure over the top of the petal, and we're going to come back down with light pressure on our cone. This will give us some variation in the line that you see here. So it's thin coming up, thick over the top, and thin going back down just by changing the pressure that we're putting on our cone. So let's go ahead and continue with this. You don't have to have this same exact amount of petals that are in the design. Just do what fits. If you have slightly less or slightly more, there's nothing wrong with that. The petals in this design are not right up against each other, so give a little space. Again, we're going up with light pressure, resulting in a thin line. As we come over the top, we're increasing our pressure on our cone, and then we lighten it as we come down, again resulting in thin lines going up, a thicker part across the top, which we call a cap, and then a thin line going back down. This helps to give the petal some character. Helps to mimic what we see in nature, even though it's henna on skin, or in this case, on laminated paper. Usually when I add petals to a flower, I don't really look at the pattern to make sure I'm adding the right amount of petals, unless the petals are crucial to the way that the design is laid out on the skin. In this case, it is not crucial, so we don't have to worry about it. All right, so now that we have all of our petals on, let's go ahead and put some filler inside those petals. In this design, there are little swirls at the base of each petal. So let's go ahead and start with those. For beginners, I recommend working your swirls from the inside out. However, if you like to work your swirls from the outside in, that's your personal choice, and please feel free to do that. I'm going to go ahead and do some tiny swirls. Very easy at the base of each one. They don't all have to be the same exact look to them. They can all be slightly different, and there's nothing wrong with that. Maybe the swirl starts a different direction than some of the others. It just gives the flower more character, in my opinion. But we want to keep them all at the base of the flower. One of the wonderful things about following a pattern from a book is that you can make slight changes to fit your taste. Okay, the next part is shading. In the ebook, the flower appears to have lots of little lines in it. If you want to go ahead and do lots of little lines, that's fine. But if you want to go ahead and do some shading, that's fine too. To do lots of little lines, you'll put a little henna paste on the tip of your cone and just kind of drag down and make lots of little tiny lines. In order to do this, your applicator is going to have a really fine tip. This is very easy. It gives the flower some character. It's lots of fun to play with. If you want to do some shading, what you can do is put a little henna paste on the tip of your cone and then squiggle it around in the top. You can do that. You can also use the extra henna paste from the cap to do that, and meaning the cap of the flower, just to pull down and scribble some shading in there. I'm going to go ahead and continue with the really thin lines because I like that look. The really thin lines are something that you'll see in nature, and it's fun to mimic that in henna as well. Kind of gives the flower some personality. So let's continue with those really thin lines, starting at the cap of the petal and pulling down towards the swirl, which is at the base of the petal. And as you become more experienced with henna, you'll find this to be a little bit easier. Also, if you're a beginner to applying henna, it may be easier for you to apply the design larger than what it shows on the paper. There's nothing wrong with that. And as you become more experienced, you can make the design smaller. This will also help when you go to price designs as well. All right, so we are done filling in those little lines on that flower. And now let's go back to the center of the flower and lay down the lines going the other direction so we can complete our crisscross design on the center of that flower. All right. Now let's go ahead and add the second flower onto this design. It starts with a half circle here. And this will be the center of the next flower. I'll go ahead, bring the paper back. So this is the part we're working on here. Okay? The centers of each flower are very, very similar. So we have lines, crisscross lines that we will go back over eventually. Again, I'm only going to do the first set of lines for the center of the flower initially, and then I'll come back and lay down the lines going the other direction. This way they don't kind of melt together, and it gives these lines some time to become more stable and dry before we drape other lines over the top of them. Then we'll come over with a second curve here like we did in the previous center of the previous flower. These two are going to be cousins. We've got a full flower and a half flower. Then let's go ahead and add in some gingerbread. Don't worry about the gingerbread being exactly even. It kind of gives some character to the flower. So if some of your gingerbread, your little scallops here, are a little bit thinner than others, that's fine. Just try to keep them the same length. So they're not, one's not really long and then the rest are really, really short. You want to try to keep them the same size. And again, we're going to go ahead and start adding some petals in. Coming up with light pressure for our thin line, over the top with thicker pressure, and back down with light pressure. Let's continue with this until we finish with the petals. Putting some space in between them if you'd like. The amount of space between petals in this pattern really isn't essential for the design placement. So if you want to put the petals really close together in this design, feel free to do so. That's my personal preference, actually, to have the petals close together. But space petals are nice too, and it just gives a little bit of extra character. All right, and let's go ahead and put some swirls in the base of these petals like we did in the other flower. Very easy, working our way from the inside to the outside of the swirl. And some of you may ask, what do you mean by the inside to the outside of the swirl? Let's take a little detour here. This is what I mean. This is the eye of the swirl. So we're working our way from the inside of the swirl to the outside. Some people work from the outside to the inside. For beginners, I always recommend working from the inside to the outside, because sometimes as a beginner, this can happen when you're working from the outside in. And then the sides start to touch and it becomes kind of melted together. When you work from the inside out, it gives you a little bit of room to guess how far out you need the swirl to be for it to look normal. So let's go ahead and let's continue. We're going to start with these little lines that come down from the caps. Again, if you want to do some shading, do that. But if you don't want to do shading, just go ahead and do these little lines. And these little lines are accomplished by putting a little bit of paste on the tip of your henna cone and then dragging it kind of in a straight line towards the swirl. This is very easy. And it's okay if they're not all perfect. If some of them are a little bit wavy, they're not exact straight, that is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Again, it gives some character to the petals, to the design. Okay, see how quick and easy that was? All right, so let's go in and lay down the other lines to crisscross in the center of the flower. As you become more experienced in doing henna, you'll be able to do a design like this in less than 10 minutes. Let's go ahead and proceed with the rest of the design. There is a diamond motif on the top of the second flower. This part here, that's what we're going to work on next. We're going to do a diamond shape, do some filler, do some accents on the outside, and then we'll move on to this part down here. Let's go ahead and get started. What we're going to do is do a diagonal line, come back with a diagonal line as close to the same length as this one, another diagonal line, and again another diagonal line. That takes some practice if you're a beginner, but if you're experienced, let's go ahead and move on to the next part. If you need a little extra help, just go ahead and rewind this video and start over again with me. Again, we're going to do a second set of diagonal lines inside of the first ones. So it's kind of a diamond shape. All right, very simple, very easy. And what we're going to go ahead and do is what we've been doing at the base of each flower is putting some swirls on the inside. So that's what we're going to do. We're just going to put in some fillers. That's it. Now, in this filler, I'm working my swirls from the outside in because I have a little bit more experience, but if you want to work your swirls from the inside out, it really won't change what the design looks like. This is very, very, very easy accent motif piece, and these are really fun to practice as well. Next, we're going to go ahead and do some gingerbread. Now, if you remember the gingerbread or the scallops, we've done that in the center of each flower, so we're going to go ahead and do that on this motif over here. Just on the edges. All right. Very easy, very simple, and try to keep them the same size if possible. And by same size, I mean height. The width, if one's a little skinnier than the other, really not going to make a big deal. All right. Now let's go ahead and add on some more finishing touches, which is the dots. The dots should be the same distance from each other, but they don't all have to be on the top of one of the scallops or on the top of one of our gingerbread. Sometimes they can be stuck in between two gingerbread, just as long as they're the same distance apart. This top dot that's on the top here has a little tail on it, and I'll bring back the paper here so we can see that again. And this is what I'm talking about here, where you have a series of dots that are graduated in size. So they get big and then they become small as you create the tail. So that's what I'm going to do now. We've already have a dot here. This is going to be our biggest dot. The next one is going to be slightly smaller. We'll put our tip here down on the piece of paper, squeeze until we get the size that we like. Put the tip of the cone down, squeeze out some henna paste, and we're going to make it slightly smaller than the dot before it. We're going to do that one more time and just put a dot of henna paste down, and it's just that simple and easy. Now we're going to go ahead and work on the finishing touch. That is this part here. Let's work on the swirls first. Remember to keep this part wide open because we've got other stuff we have to stack on top of it. We're going to try to make these swirls the same size. All right, I'm going to start over on that part right there. I made a little itty bitty mistake. This is something that is often a challenge for me. It's making my swirls the same when I come out from two different sides. Actually, what I think I'm going to do, and this should probably be easier for me, is to come out like that. And if you find that that's easy for you, then do that. All right, there we go. In the next part, we have the same curved line, but instead of going to a swirl, we just put a dot on the ends. So let's go ahead and do that. Come out. As we curve around, we're just going to push some henna paste out, and we've got a dot on the ends. Very easy. Let's do that on this side. Very easy. There we go. And then we're going to do the next set of lines. It's kind of like a spear leaf, I call it. So just like what we did with the dots, the line with the dot, we're going to come out, but then we're going to have a ball of henna paste and we're going to pull out and put a tail on it. This looks kind of like a spear to me. That's why I kind of call it a spear leaf. I have all sorts of little creative names for things. Helps you to remember what you're doing. All right, we're going to do the same on this side, ball of henna, pull a little tail out, we've got another spear leaf. Now we're going to come in with the final motif. We have a curve out on each side, like so. We're going to come up to the top. Same on this side. And then we're going to come in with a little bump, like so. We're going to put a swirl at the base of that. And then we're going to pull down little lines like we did in our petals. So even though the shape of the petal and this motif here are two different shapes, we're mimicking things that we've seen before. And it's always fun to do that in designs. Okay? And then again, we're going to do some graduated size and dots. Graduated meaning the size before it is a little bit larger. So here we have our biggest dot. We're going to come in with another dot that's slightly smaller. Come in with another dot that is slightly smaller. And we have finished our design. Very easy. If you need to repeat any of these steps, please rewind the video and start over again with me. Let's proceed to the next motif. Work on the petals and then add this final part here. At the center of the motif is just a simple swirl. It's not elaborate, it's not very big, it's just kind of one of those center, wrap around once kind of deals. And then we're going to come around it with a bunch of little swirls. Let's keep those little swirls close together. We don't want to have too much spacing between the little swirls. Okay. Very simple, very easy, very quick. And around those little swirls, we're going to come in with some gingerbread or some scallops. And we're going to try to keep these scallops small. Like so. We'll just go around. All right. Then we have a line that goes around the scallops. Okay. Very easy. And then we're going to come in with the petals. The petals look like hearts without the pointed tip. Let's go ahead and take a look at the motif again. So they look like little hearts without the tips. Let's go ahead and get started with those. So it's up with light pressure, over the top with heavy pressure, dipping down, coming back up, and then back down with light pressure. And they alternate between large and small, and you can see that if you look at your paper there. We're going to come up with light pressure, come about halfway point. To this flower, we're going to put more pressure on, dip down, come back up, and then we're going to lighten the pressure so the line comes back down thin. Let's still go ahead and do that again, coming up with light pressure. We're going to make a taller petal, heavy pressure over the top, dip down, come back up, and then down with light pressure. Let's go ahead and do that again. Light pressure going up, heavy over the cap, dip down in the middle, heavy back up, and light down with light pressure. Again, this is a tall petal. Up, light pressure, heavy pressure over the top, dip down in the middle, heavy pressure over, and light coming back down for a thin line. That one was kind of big. And let's go ahead again, doing the same thing with a short petal. And let's go ahead and leave it just like that. Now, if you don't have the same number of petals that are in the pattern, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that as long as your placement is good. If you have any questions about petals or you need to review that, go ahead and rewind the video and go over that with me again. Now, let's proceed. As in the previous design, we're going to go ahead with thin lines through the tops of each petal. All right. And it's just a little bit of henna on the tip of your cone or your applicator, and you just lay down a bunch of thin lines. If some of them are slightly longer than others, that's fine. It just lends more character to the petal. If some of them are slightly thicker than others, that's fine, but you don't want your thin lines to touch. So try to give them a little bit of space in between each other. All right. Okay, there we go. All right. We're finished with that part. So let's go ahead and put some dots. There are some dots in this petal. In the previous design, there were swirls in the base, and this one, there are dots in the base. For the bigger petals, you have 2 dots, and for the shorter petals, you have 1 dot at the base of the petal. This is one of the taller ones, so we're going to do 2 dots stacked right on top of each other. Just like so, 1 dot, 2 dots. 1 dot for the shorter, 2 dots, and 1 dot. Whoops, got out of frame there for a second. If you look at your paper, I hope you'll understand. I'm just going to go over what I did. I did 1, 2 dots, 1 dot, 1, 2 dots, 1 dot, 1, 2 dots, and 1 dot. Very simple, very easy. Now let's go on to this little paisley shaped thing. It's not exactly a paisley. It's kind of a funny shape, but that's the closest name I can come for it. All right. So it's just a curve like so. And it does have kind of a belly on the front of it, but it doesn't have a belly on the back. All right. We'll just curve it just like that. And then it's filled with a swirl with a cap on it. And I'm going to go ahead and show you what that looks like. I'm just going to draw 2 lines here. You don't have to do that. But basically what we're doing is we're putting a swirl. This is a basic swirl. And then we're going to put an extra line over the top of it. I'm going to do that again. A swirl with an extra line over the top of it. A swirl with an extra line over the top of it. And so that's what we're going to put inside this paisley shaped thing here. Let's go ahead and go back to the design. As you become more experienced, you'll find that doing fillers becomes a lot easier. And you can do them very quickly. Try not to be picky about the way the fillers look. If one part's a little bit bigger than the other, it's not a huge deal. You just want to make sure that the shape is filled in. So if you have to squeeze some little ones in just to kind of even things out, then please do that. But in the end, once the henna paste comes off the skin and it's stained and everything's good to go, it really doesn't make a big difference. All right, we're filled. If you have any questions or you need to review that part, go ahead and rewind the video and start over again with me. So let's go ahead and proceed to add the accent pieces onto this design. There's an extra thick line that comes around the belly of this paisley kind of shape thing. So we're going to have a thick line that's going to join the tip up here. So what I did is I came over, thick line, thick line, thick line, and then I connected it right here at the tip. Very quick, very easy. We're going to do some scallops, also known as gingerbread, on that line. Like so. And try to keep them the same height, but if some are a little skinnier or some are a little wider, there's nothing wrong with that, but try to keep them the same height. Very quick and easy gingerbread. And then on top of the gingerbread, just some very simple circles. They're open circles, they're not filled in. And we're not going to make them really big. And they are not graduated in size, meaning they don't get bigger or smaller as you work your way up. You just try to make them the same size as possible. And then we come with a heart-shaped little accent here. And the way that I did that is did one of those and did one of those. That is it. Very simple. Okay, then we have graduated dots that kind of curve and they get smaller towards the tip. Very easy. So what I did is just dot, 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 and I squeezed just a little bit lighter, making each dot, subsequent dot, smaller. We're almost finished. What we're going to go ahead and do is add some swirls and some dots on top of the petals. That's these guys here. On the short petal, there's a series of 4 dots. On the taller petals, there's a swirl with a series of 3 dots. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's start with the short petal here. And it's simply 1, 2, 3, 4 dots. Then we're going to go ahead with a swirl on this taller one. 1, 2, 3 dots. Again, on the shorter one, 1, 2, 3, 4. And these dots are all kind of connected. And then we come in with a swirl. Okay, and that swirl connects to the top of the petal, and we're going to put 1, 2, 3 dots on top of that swirl. 1, 2, 3, 4 dots on top of that short petal. And for the last one, we're going to go ahead and do a swirl, our last and final swirl for this design. We're going to put 1, 2, 3 dots. And guys, we are finished with this motif in just under 10 minutes. As you become more experienced, you'll be able to do this design in about 5 to 7 minutes. Here's the pattern. Here is the final design. If you have any questions or need to review anything, go ahead and rewind this video and start over again with me. Let's go ahead and start with the center of the flower, which is a basic swirl. We're going to continue with these petals, then the second layer of petals, then the third layer of petals, the leaves, and the little accent pieces. All right, let's go. A little swirl. We start in the middle and work our way out. All right. Then we have the petals, which there aren't thin and thick lines in this petal, so we don't come up with light pressure, go over the top with heavy, and come back down with light. We're actually going to maintain consistent pressure. The lines on these petals are actually kind of thick. We're not going to have heavy or light, but just somewhere in the middle. As you can see, the petals are all sort of different shapes slightly, but the thickness is of the line is all the same. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to come up, consistent pressure, just do a little round there, and come up like that, and do the same on the other side. Now in the pattern, there are 5 petals initially, but if you end up with 6 or 4, there's nothing wrong with that. You want these petals to be close, but not exactly connected so they don't blend together. All right, let's do the same over here and over here. All right, over here and over here, over here and over here. There we go. Let's go ahead and go on with the second set of petals, which will be here, 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 and here. They're going to have a slightly different shape where they're just going to be rounded and come to a point because these petals do not have a base. If this were a petal in nature, the base would be hidden under these flowers, so we wouldn't even see it. And we're going to go ahead and mimic that in our henna design. Okay? We're just going to pull off of these petals that already exist and just do the rounded part and the point. Very easy. And we are done with our second set of petals. Now let's go in with our third set of petals. That will be here, 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 and here. Now this petal, the top is slightly different. It's going to look something like this. All right, so let's continue with that. Very easy, very quick. And one thing that has always worked for me, and as a tip I share with everyone, is to hold the henna cone as close to the skin as possible. So you don't want to do part of a design, lift your cone up, and then go back to doing that design. Keep the henna cone as close to the skin as possible. Now on the inside of these petals, there are little lines. You can do shading if you want to, but I'm going to go ahead and do little lines because I like that look. On the first set of petals, the little lines come up from the base. It's the same for the second set of petals, but the third set of petals are a little bit different. Not only are they different in shape and different in placement, But instead of the lines coming from the base, they come from the top. Let's work on that second set of petals. Basically, the first and second set are pretty much the same. They both have rounded sides and come up to a point. Now the third set also has rounded sides and comes up to another curve. So it's a little bit different. And the lines come from the top and go down. Kind of gives it some personality. Lots of fun to work with this design. When I saw this ebook and decided to teach this class, I knew that this design was going to be one that made it into the class because it's so fun to do. And when you break it down, it's actually very easy. Once you become more experienced in applying festival type designs, you'll be able to do something like this in under 5 minutes. It appears like it has lots of little details, but it's actually just lots of small pieces put together. All right, now let's go ahead and add the leaves. The leaves do not face each other. They don't like each other. So we're going to curve one line out this way, put a belly on the other line, and these two will meet. We'll do the same thing on the other side. It's going to be kind of a mirror of each other. So these two leaves don't like each other. They're both facing different directions. In nature, you sometimes see that. We're going to put lines on the inside here. And this kind of mimics the vein that you see in flowers in nature. Okay. Very easy. All right, and when we're going to come in with some diagonal lines, we're just going to lay them in here. You don't have to have the same number of diagonal lines that you see in the pattern. You can make your diagonal lines thick, you can make them thinner, you can have lots of them, you can just have a few. This is all your personal preference here. The pattern is just a guide. But if you find that the person that you're working on has small hands and feet, and you have to alter the design, that's just part of being an artist and it's part of the creative process. All right. So we are finished laying our lines, and our diagonal lines should touch this edge and touch this edge, but it should not cross over in here. If you find that that happens, you simply take your henna cone, and the tip of your henna cone should be clean. It should not have any henna on it, and you just drag it up the center and clean out any henna that may have crossed over that center line, and it's just that easy. Now we're going to go on to the finishing touches, which are some kind of squiggly lines with balls at the end, and then some graduated circles. Let's go ahead with this squiggly lines with balls at the end. So it kind of curves with the belly of the leaf, and then it kind of takes off on its own, and we put a dot on the end of it. Let's go ahead and do that again. There's 3 on each side, and they're graduated in size. So the next one is slightly shorter than the squiggly line before it, but the ball on the tip of each squiggly line is the same size. Let's do the same over here. That first squiggly line is mimicking that belly on the leaf. We come out, dot on the tip. We do that again, the second line being a little bit shorter than the first one. Ball on the tip. And then this last little one and a ball on the tip. Again, each ball is the same size, but the squiggly line is just slightly shorter than the one before it. And that is also a term that we call graduated in size. Then we're going to do some dots, or not dots, but circles that turn into dots that are graduated in size. So let's go ahead and start off with our biggest circle. We're going to do that here. Let's do another one that's slightly smaller. Basically the same circle, but smaller. Let's do a third. And if you can do another one that's open in the center, that's slightly smaller, then do that. But as they become too small, then they're not open in the center anymore, and it's okay just to do some dots that just slightly get smaller. And that's it. Very fun. We've completed this one in under 10 minutes. If there's anything that you need to review, please rewind the video and start over again with me. So here's the one from the pattern book, and here's the one that we finished today. Let's continue with the next design. In my ebook, I'm going to go ahead on to page 3, and we're going to do this design here. I'm going to show you the other designs on this page so that you know what page I'm on and you can go ahead and match up what you have in your book. But we're going to do this one right here. So follow along with me, please. It's going to be a little bit similar to one we've done previously as far as the center of the flower, which is just a basic circle. And again, we're going to keep even pressure when we go to make this circle. We're not going to do a lot of stopping and starting, because when you do that, you end up having bumps in your circle. Don't be concerned about making a perfect circle. If there's anything you want to correct, just go back around and fill it in. All right, and we're going to lay down our thin lines, but we're not going to crisscross yet. Again, why? Because we want the lines there to have some time to become a little bit dry and to become solid. We don't want all of our lines to kind of melt together. If you do see that that's happening, you clean off the tip of your comb by wiping it with your fingers. Make sure there's no henna on there. Do not squeeze it. Do not put any pressure, and just simply drag the fine tip of your cone in between the lines. And that'll open up some space in between them if you see that they're starting to connect. Now let's go ahead and put in some dots. These dots will be the same distance apart and they'll be about the same size. All right. Same distance apart. You don't have to measure if you want to. You can, but there's no need to measure. You can just guess. And then we'll go ahead and do this really fun design. It's like scalloping around. Okay. And if you want to do just one consistent scallop all the way around, you can do that. Your scallops should all be the same height, but they do not have to be the same width. One's a little bit skinnier than the other. It's not a big deal. It just adds to the character of the design. All right, let's go ahead and do some petals. Like the petals from our very first design, we came up with a thick line we came up with a thin line putting light pressure on our cone or our applicator. We went over the top with heavy pressure, making a thicker line, and then we came back down with lighter pressure, again with a thin line. Let's go ahead and do that again. Light pressure coming up creates a thin line. We're going to come over the top with heavy pressure, dipping down slightly in the middle, and then coming down with light pressure. All right, let me retrace my line. Didn't quite make it all the way down. There we go. We're going to try to make our petals the same height. If one's slightly skinnier than the other, it's not a big deal, but make sure your petals are the same height. These ones are a little bit closer together than the petals that we did in the very first design, but there is still a little bit of space in between. We're coming up with light pressure, going over the top with a little bit of heavy pressure, creating a thicker line, and then coming down with lighter pressure. Let's continue with that until we finish the petals that we have. If there's any confusion about light and heavy pressure, please go ahead and rewind the video and restart with me. We want to make them the same height. One can be skinnier than the other, like I said before, but we want to make all our petals the same height. This gives our design some consistency. After we finish the petals, we're going to go ahead and review the design from the template. Again, if you are taking this class online and you've ordered it from FreeHandMehndi.com, you should have a copy of this ebook that we're working from along with this video. And you can follow along. I've printed out the 17 pages of the book, not including the cover and back cover, and I've numbered them 1 through 17. All right, and we're going to squeeze a little petal in here. We're going to make it the same height, but it's not going to be as wide as the others, and that's okay. And that's actually something we see in the pattern book as well. So let's go ahead and review. So far, this is what we've done, and we're going to come in and put some little skinny lines at the base. If you don't have the same amount of petals that you see in the pattern book, that's okay, just as long as the design is laid down properly. Let's go ahead and continue with the little lines coming up from the base. And not all the little lines have to be the same height. Some of them can be shorter, some can be longer, some can be slightly thicker, some can be thin, just as long as they stay inside of the petal. That's it. And try to place at least 2 or 3 inside each petal. Some petals can have more lines, some petals can have fewer lines. It's all a personal preference, and it gives the design a little bit of personality. If the design is too uniform, then it kind of takes away from the character of the design. You want your petals and your flowers look very natural. Even though I know in nature, flowers don't have crisscrosses in the middle, but that's kind of the artistic side of henna, that you can do things to flowers that you don't normally see in nature. Before we proceed, we're going to go ahead and finish the crisscross lines in the center of the flower, because we've given some lines in there time to become solid. All right, well, let's go ahead and proceed with the accent pieces. That's these guys on the edges. Okay, follow along from the ebook, please. And we're going to start with the swirl, which has a heavy eye in the middle, and then it wraps around with a thin line. And the way that you do that is you apply heavy pressure here. Whoops, out of frame again. You apply heavy pressure here, creating that dot, and you lighten the pressure as you come around, resulting in a thinner line. Gives a little bit of depth to that. And then we're going to come around here and do just kind of some interesting motif that doesn't really have a name, but it's kind of a curve like so. And then we're going to thicken it up, but come to a pointy line on the tip. Doesn't really have a name. We're going to come again following that with a thin line, but we're not going to connect it. We're just going to leave it out here by itself. Aww. And then we're going to come around with a thick line over here. Make a belly and connect it at the top. Simple, easy. We're coming in with some lines. Thin lines. These thin lines should not touch here. The base of those thin lines is this line, but they don't go so far across that they touch that line. And if some of them are slightly shorter than the other, that's fine. And if some are slightly thicker than others, that's fine. Just gives more character to the design, but you don't want them to touch the two big lines on the side, just this one over here. Right here. The little line should touch this one, but they should not touch this line here. All right, and then we're going to come in with some dots. All the dots will be the same size, but they will be equal distance apart. You don't have to put the same number of dots as you see in the pattern there in the ebook. The design should just lay correctly, and that's our goal. Let's go ahead and do the same exact thing we did on this side to this side. A design like this should take you about 5 minutes to complete once you become more experienced. And if you're wanting to know about pricing, this pricing for a design like this should be in the $10 to $15 range. If you can get more money for a design like this in your area, because prices do vary by area, then please feel free to mark yourself up. But this design should not be cheaper than $10, only because there's a lot of detail. And as you become more experienced, you can make this design smaller, but it's very easy to make a design larger. And we're doing the exact same thing on this side that we did on the other. This line is thin, while this one is a little bit thicker. And then we're going to pull some lines from that thick line. Little skinny guys, we're going to plop them in here. Some of the little skinny guys are longer than the other, and that's fine. Some are slightly thicker, that's fine. Then we're going to plop some dots over here. They're going to be equal distance apart, and they're going to be about the same size. We are making great progress here, and we have actually finished the design. Very quick and very easy. So there it is. Here it is on the template. Here it is that we have applied. If you need to review anything, please rewind this video and start over again with me. Let's go ahead and proceed to the next design. The next design that we're going to do is going to be on page 6. I've numbered my pages 1 through 6. I've printed out 17 pages, not including the front or back cover. We're going to do this one here, which is very quick and easy. So let's go ahead and get started. This design starts with a simple swirl on the inside. Heavy pressure, making that dot, lighten the pressure, come around, and make a thinner line. This is a very, very easy design to do. Then we're going to do 2 layers of gingerbread or scallops around that swirl. Okay? And if you're confused by what I'm saying about 2 layers, all will be explained in just a moment. I'm going to finish this first layer. Okay. And then we're going to go in and we're going to put another layer of gingerbread on top of those. And again, the gingerbread does not have to be the same width, but it does need to be the same length. So some of your gingerbread are a little bit skinnier or a little bit fatter, that's fine, but they all need to be the same height or length. Okay? And the only way to accomplish that is by practice, not by getting out a ruler. All right? Very easy, very simple. And then we're going to come in with some petals. These petals are very, very easy. What you do is you start out with some heavy pressure and you just continue down, and as you get to the very tip, you lighten that pressure up. Let's go ahead and review the pattern. So the petal is just pretty solid until you get to the very bottom right before you connect it with the gingerbread, and then it thins out a little bit. Let's go ahead and continue with that, keeping them equal distance apart. Thick, 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 thick. Heavy pressure, light pressure as we get to the tip. And let's continue with that. Heavy pressure, and then as we get to the connecting point, we lighten that pressure. Heavy, 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 heavy pressure, light pressure. All right, and let's continue with that. You don't have to have the same number of petals as we see in the book. Maybe you want to spread them out a little bit further than what you see in the book. Maybe you want to put them closer. This is your personal preference. Gives character to the design. Let's continue with this. This is a quick and easy one. Oops, we missed joining these two. All right. This is very, very easy design. Something you can do very, very quick. It's really great for birthday parties to do really simple designs like this. But because it has curly cues on it, you know, it makes it really popular. All right, so the next step is putting those curly cues on. And that's just this. These loops, 3 of those, and as you come to finish it out, you're going to put a little spear on the end. Let's go ahead and do the same thing to the other side. We'll take the top of this petal, 1 loop, 2 loops, 3 loops, and as we come to finish her out, we squeeze some henna paste and drag the tip out to make a spear. I'm going to show you what that looks like again because I got a little bit out of frame. So let's say that there is a petal here, okay? We're pulling out the top, 1 loop, 2 loops, 3 loops, and as we come over the top, we squeeze out henna paste, making a ball, and then we drag the tip out, making a little spear shape. So there she is. Very simple, very easy. This should be less than 5 minutes. You can charge $5 to $10 for that, for a festival design like that. Let's go ahead and proceed to the next design. If you have any questions or need to review anything, go ahead and rewind this video and start over again with me. Hello everyone, we're going to go ahead and proceed to page number 8. On page number 8, you will see the following designs. So go ahead and find this page in your ebook, which should be the 8th one. Since that's how I've numbered them, there are actually 3 designs that we're going to do on this page. The very first one that we're going to do is this guy right here. This one is very popular and it's very fun, but it's got a lot of fine details. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start with the major focus of this design, which is the paisley that's in the middle that starts with a swirl. And then we're going to come down and give her a belly. It's kind of like a pear shape. We're going to swirl around, come back up, connect back at the top. When you get to the top, you don't want to stop, but you just kind of want to overlap that line. So there's not like a separation there. You want to overlap these lines at the top so they touch. All right, let's go ahead and start with some filler, and that's two layers of very small swirls. So let's just do that. 1 line of swirls. And if they are slightly different in thickness, that's fine. Just try to keep them the same size, and I'm going to start with that second line of swirls. Lots of different little fillers in this paisley, which makes it really fun. Okay. Then we're going to go to the top and just fill in part of that. Right there, we're going to do a curved line over that, and another curved line, and another curved line. But if you only do 2 curved lines, that's okay, not a big deal. We're going to do some little gingerbread that are kind of short, kind of small. We're going to come over the top of those with gingerbread that are a little bit longer and a little bit bigger. Okay? Then we're going to come over the top with a line. And that space between the tops of that gingerbread and that line, we're going to fill in with henna paste. Kind of creates a cap, which is lots of fun. I like doing that. Then we're going to come over with 3 lines. 1, 2, 3, like we did previously. And then we're going to do a little bit of gingerbread. Okay. Little short ones. And then we're going to do some swirls. Okay. And it's just kind of a pattern of filler. And then we're going to put a line over the top of these swirls, but we're not going to fill it in though. No, we are not going to fill it in. We're going to put a little bit of gingerbread over the top of it. It's just kind of like making lasagna. You just put on the cheese, and then you put on the other stuff, then you put the noodles, and blah, 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 you know. Then we're going to do a straight, thick line right here. And then we're going to do little lines connecting to the top. Whoop. The top of that gingerbread. Ooh, these lines are tiny. All right. Now, if you're at the point like I am, and there's not a lot of space between these swirls and this right here, you can just kind of fill it in with whatever you can fit in there. But if you have lots of space in between there, you do what you can put in there. You just keep repeating what we've been doing. I'm just going to do a little bit of gingerbread and call it a day. When you do a design like this and you find that all the fillers that are in the book won't fit inside the paisley, don't worry about it. Just do what you can in there. Just put what you can, put what you can fit, and then don't worry about smashing all the little other pieces that are in the book in there, because then the inside will look crowded and then the fillers won't make sense. So let's go ahead and proceed to the little flower that's on this part. It has a swirl in the middle, as many flowers in henna design start with a swirl in the middle. And then it has a thin line around it, just kind of protecting it, because the center of the flower is a very important part. It needs protecting. Then we're going to come in with a little tiny thin gingerbread. The little babies. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Then we're going to put a thick line around those. Let's make it thick. Just squeeze heavy on that henna cone or applicator and put a thick line touching the top of that little gingerbread. Then we're going to come in with some long, skinny gingerbread or scallops. Okay. There we go. Getting the hang of it, guys, huh? Now, it's not as small as it looks in the pattern book, but that's because my paisley isn't huge. All right. Then we're going to come around those with a line here. If I had made my paisley bigger, then this flower would look bigger. But in the way that you place the design, you have to do the paisley first. You can't do the flower, have it miss 2 petals, and then stick a paisley on there. When you're doing henna, there's a technique to actually building the design and the way that it's supposed to look. So let's go ahead and put 4 or 5 petals or 6 petals or however many petals you can fit equal distance apart on here. Comes up, has a slight curve, comes to a point. We're going to do the same thing on this side. Put a little space between these petals, because that's the way Aisha did it in the book. All right, curve around the top. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. There we go. And then we're going to put these little tiny circles at the base and then put dots around that circle, and just 4, no more than that. If you can only fit 2 or 3, do that, but don't do any more than 4 because we're going to put little dots around that. And if you look in the pattern book, you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay. And again, if you are taking this class and you ordered it from FreeHandMehndi.com, you should have your pattern book along with this class. Okay. All right. Now let's go ahead and put some really thin lines inside these petals. And you can either start from the base of the petal and work your way up, or you can start from the tip of the petal and work your way down. It's completely your decision. Just make sure that they're equal distance apart and their lines are about the same size. You don't want to have thick and thin because these are kind of imaginary lines, really. They're just fun lines. They're not let's mimic nature lines. They're kind of made up. I've never seen a flower in nature that just has random stripes through the petals like that. Though I'm sure it exists somewhere in the world, right? All right. So we filled those in. We're finished with the flower. Let's go ahead and add some dots on the outside of this paisley. And the dots are the same size. They're equal distance apart. And they are connected to the line. They are not separated from the line. And we're just going to work those up. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side of the paisley. Okay? If you are at all confused or need to review anything, go ahead and restart the video and continue with me from the beginning. All right, there we go. And let's go ahead and put a crown on top of that paisley. Make her complete. And it's just a curve like so. Then up. Then up. Like that. Comes to a point. Because I was out of frame, I'm going to go ahead and redo that. So it was like so. Curves out, comes up, curves out, comes up. And if they don't join each other, just retrace that other line and bring it together. Very easy, very simple. Now, let us proceed to fill that one in. And it's really easy to fill in because it is just gingerbread. Yes, fillers, guys, fillers. Gingerbread is a very popular filler, especially in Indian henna. And then we're going to have circles that touch the top of the gingerbread, but do not cross through the middle of them. They are not closed circles, they are open circles. We're going to go over the tops of those with gingerbread. And guess what's going to go on top of the second layer of gingerbread if you can fit it in? Circles. I'm only able to fit in 2 more circles. So mine is finished, but if you have more space, then please add in more layers of gingerbread and circles. If you don't have any more space, then let's proceed on to the next step, which is just graduated dots and a little spear at the end. 1, 2, 3 dots, and then a spear. That's it, guys. Very simple, very easy. You should be able to complete this design in just under 10 minutes. And then this design would probably be in the $15 range. If you have any questions or you need to review anything, again, please rewind this portion of the video and restart with me. If you're ready to continue on, let's go on to the next design. Okay, so the next design that we're going to do is on page number 8. And this is the design here. It's on the same page as one of the designs we just completed. Here are some of the other designs on this page. So identify this page, identify this design, which is in the lower left of page number 8, and we're going to go ahead and get started with this design. Florals are really fun, and designs like this are really easy to map out and lay down because it starts basically with the flower in the center. So let's go ahead and do that. And some of the templates that I'm using to apply the henna designs onto feature hands and feet. These designs do not have to be applied to directly where I am applying them on the template. They can be used on the hands, the arms, wherever you like. So it starts with the circle in the middle, and then we're going to come around with some gingerbread. And there are 2 layers of gingerbread, so we're going to do that. 2 layers of gingerbread. I actually kind of like that look for florals. It kind of makes the flower bigger than it actually is. You want to keep them the same height. They can be slightly wider or skinnier than the one before it or the one after it. That's fine, just as long as they're the same height. All right. Next, we are going to put some petals on. These petals are very similar to petals that we've done previously on other designs. Basically, it comes up. We're going light pressure. We're going to put more pressure on and come over the top, creating a cap. And then come down with light pressure, finishing it off with a thin line. And let's continue to do that. These petals are not right up against each other. They do have a little bit of space in between them. The petals don't all have to be the exact same size, but they should be spaced the same. So you don't want a big gap between 2 and then a small gap between 2. You want to keep the gap consistent. So again, we're coming up with then light pressure on the cone, which creates a thin line. We're going to increase that pressure on the cone, causing us to have a thicker line over the top, and then we're going to come down with a light line, or light pressure on the cone, and the line is thinner. This gives some depth to the flower, and we're going to continue that all the way around. If you are at all confused about how we've gotten to this part, go ahead and rewind the video and start over with me again, or you can continue to proceed with me in creating the rest of the design. Okay, we're almost finished. And I've been asked this question quite often: how do I keep the size of my petals consistent? Now, when you hand draw something, it's not going to be perfect. And when you're doing henna, you don't want to take out a ruler and start measuring things. What you want to do is make the first line that you draw as close to the same size as the previous line. There might be some slight variances, as you see here in mine. This petal here is just slightly taller than that one, but just by a little bit, not by a lot. That will happen, but you don't want a significant difference between the size of the petals. And it's very important, again, that the space between the petals be the same. It be consistent. You don't want really wide gaps between some petals and then thin gaps between others. All right, so now that we've finished our petals, we're going to go ahead and put the dots at the base of each petal. And that's done just by squeezing henna paste and then lifting off. Squeezing henna paste, dropping it down, and then lifting it back up. If you're using henna paste that's really stringy and you don't lift up after each dot, you'll find sometimes that the dot will drag, and you don't want that. All right, and we're also going to come in with some thin lines from the top of the petal. You can either pull those down from the extra henna paste that's in the top of the petal, those caps we made by pushing a little bit more pressure at the top when we were making the petals, or you can put a little bit of henna paste on the tip of the cone and just drape really thin lines. In order to drape really thin lines, you're going to need henna that is very stringy. Naturally stringy, like Moroccan henna or Rajasthani henna, or you'll need to add sugar to your paste to make the lines drape better. All right, guys. So there we have it. We're pretty much finished with the petals here, so let's go ahead and move on to the rest of the motifs. Now you may be looking at this design thinking, okay, where do I go next? Because mapping a design is very, very important. It's very good to get the foundation of the design before you start adding on accents. Now you might think the paisley is probably the next step, or some of these other swirly lines, but it's actually the wavy lines with the gingerbread on them that should come next. And you can just pick a petal to do this wavy line off of, but it's just very simple like that. And I didn't mean to make it really thick right there, so I'm going to go back in and fill that in a little bit. I was squeezing a little bit hard on my cone. Alright, so let's go back on that and put some gingerbread on it. Again, your gingerbread should be the same height, but should not be, one should not be taller than the other. Alright, now that we've got our gingerbread, we're going to go ahead and bring in that paisley piece. And it's just the front sides of a paisley. And then we bring in that curly Q, and then we connect it from the back. We're going to do some little lines here, like similar to what we did in the petals. And then we're going to come in with some dots here, like we see in the design. All right. And then behind that, we're going to do 2 petals. It's the same style of petal that we put on the flower, up with light pressure, creating a thin line over the top with heavy pressure, then back down with light pressure. I'm going to drop those dots on the inside of those. And then we're going to put our thin lines, either by dragging henna paste from the cap on top of the flower, or by just draping really short lines. Then we're going to come in with lines and with dots. Now you can do those 2 different ways. You can either start with the dot and then wrap around with a thin line, or you can start with the thin line and come up and make a dot. It's whatever your preference is. In this case, because I'm tucking a really thin line and dot in a really tight space, I'm just going to go ahead and start with the dot first, which is just heavy pressure, and then we're going to lighten the pressure and just wrap that line and tuck it in there between the petal and the paisley, the top of that paisley. And we're going to do that a couple of more times, but the subsequent ones are going to connect with the petals. They're not going to be squeezed between the paisley and the first petal. They're actually going to connect, and they're going to decrease in size. All right, very simple, very easy. Now let's go ahead and start with that swirl that has the gingerbread on it. We're going to tuck the first part of the swirl in here. I'm going to work my swirl from the outside in, but you can work your swirl from the inside out, whatever works best for you. All right, we're going to put a cap over the top of that swirl, and then we're going to do another cap over the top of that swirl. Very easy. And then we're going to come in with 2 layers of gingerbread. And we clean these off so they're not distracting us. And it appears that I have smudged one of my lines, so what I'm going to do with my cone is go in there and just straighten it out. And correct that. All right, let's go in and do our gingerbread. All right, another layer. All right, and then we're going to put some dots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now, if you end up putting 5 dots or 6 dots or 10 dots, that's your prerogative. Just keep them equally spaced. They don't have to be perfect. And then we're going to come on this side here and do a swirl. Just like that. And then we're going to wrap some accent lines around that swirl, which start thick at the top and then thin out towards the bottom. And I'm going to repeat what I said before. heavy pressure, heavy, light pressure, creating a thin line. And that's basically how it's done. And I'm going to lighten the pressure right about here and tuck it in there. And that's it. We finished the first side. Now let's go ahead and move on to the other side. All right. This side is slightly different than the other side. As you can see, there's more of a curved arch in that first line we do. It's kind of like a big C, just like that. And then we're going to go ahead and put some gingerbread on it. Gingerbread should be the same height, but if some of them are slightly wider or slightly skinnier, it's not a big deal, just as long as they're the same height. All right. Okay, and on the back of that, we're going to put some petals. Same petals we put on the flower, so we don't have to go over that again because we already know how to do those. If you need to review exactly how we did the petals in this design here and then over here, then go ahead and rewind this video and start over with me. But if you're ready to continue, let's go. Up with light pressure, over the top with heavy pressure, coming back down with light pressure. And I will continue to do that. If one of your petals is slightly wider or skinnier than the one next to it, nothing wrong with that as long as they're about the same height. And they should be spaced equal distance apart. So you don't want a lot of distance between a couple of the petals and then a little bit of distance between some of them. You want them all to be the same distance apart, and by distance I mean this space in between here should be about the same. You don't need to get out your ruler and measure, just estimate with your eye, and you should be good to go. All right, now let's go ahead and pull down those lines there. I'm just pulling from henna paste we already have in the cap. Not really squeezing my cone at all. Just dragging down those fine lines there. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and do that swirl in here and connect it to the petal there. And then I'm going to continue with some more of those tail looking things that are fat towards the top and thin out towards the bottom. We're going to do those. Do however many you want to fit in there. The design has 3, but if you want to do 5 or you want to do 2, you know, it's your prerogative. It doesn't really ruin the design. I think that's all I'm going to do. That works. All right, let's go ahead and we're going to do some lines with dots on them. Looks like there are 1, 2, 3, 4 in the design. If you want to do 4, do 4. If you want to do 3, that's fine. But I would do at least 2. I'm going to go ahead and just do 3 instead of 4. All right, so we're going to come over here, do a swirl. And then we're going to do 2 layers of gingerbread around that swirl. Okay. We're going to put dots around. The dots just need to be an equal distance apart. They don't have to set in between or on top of the gingerbread. They do need to connect with the gingerbread though. All right. And let's go ahead and do the same on the other side. Slightly different though, so I want you to look carefully at what I do. We're going to do a swirl that's going to come out and connect with the base of that line there. Okay. And then we're going to do some of those tail looking things that are fat at the bottom and thin out as they come to the base. Looks like there's 3 in the design here. You can do as many as you like. I probably would not do more than 4. And they're graduated in size, as you can see, and by that I mean This is longest, and then this one is medium, and then this one is small. So graduated in size, they get bigger as you work your way up. Then we're going to come in with some gingerbread on top of this one. Gingerbread should be the same height, meaning all of these are the same height. They can be different widths though. I wouldn't make them significantly wider or significantly thinner than others, but also if you see a slight difference in their size, meaning their width, then I really wouldn't worry about it. But a significance in height can make the difference, and I'll show you an example of what I mean. So let's say we're doing gingerbread. These are about the same height, but then you start doing something like that or like this, then you'll see a significant difference in your design between that one and this one. You want them to be about the same height. All right, let us continue with finishing the design, which is just some dots, which is something that we've seen throughout this design many times. You want them to be about the same distance apart. Where exactly they sit on the gingerbread is unimportant. All right, and we are officially done with this design. Let's go ahead and move on to another one. The next design that we're going to do is also on page 8. It's this one here. It's in the upper right hand corner. This is a design that we just finished. Here's one we did earlier, and now we're going to do this one here. Take a moment to identify the other designs on this page if you haven't numbered your book the same way I have numbered mine, and then let's go ahead and do that one together. This one is pretty simple, very easy. It should take you no more than 5 to 10 minutes to create if you're just running it straight through. All right, so let's first start with the main part of the design, which you may think is the flower, but the flower actually builds off of something else. So we're going to create that something else, which starts with the two swirls that come up into kind of a, I guess it looks kind of like a fish. So we've got the swirl. Comes up into something like that. We're going to do the same on the other side. These two guys connect here, and then they branch out. Well, they will come back up and connect. Let's thicken this line a little bit here. That looks kind of funky, so I'm going to retrace it. Thickening up this line, and let's go ahead and thicken this one up too. Since this is the main part of the design, it's good for this area to be bold because this is what we're going to build the design off of. So let's go ahead and start working on the filler for this piece, which just starts as a big dot here at the very tip, and we put two caps on it. That's just two curved lines over the top. You'll see that a lot when in Indian henna when switching from one filler to the other. In between fillers you'll see little caps. That's not a hard and fast rule that you have to follow, but it's something that you'll commonly see. We're just going to do some vertical lines here. Okay. We're going to have another cap over the top of this. And on top of that cap is going to be some gingerbread. You don't want to make it very long, you don't want to make it very big. Just easy gingerbread, and the lines for the filler are going to be a little bit thinner, as you can obviously see. All right, and on top of that gingerbread is some gingerbread that's a little bit wider. And I'll show you what I mean. It's wider in size. So about 2 of the smaller gingerbread to fit inside these bigger gingerbread. It's not a hard and fast rule, but that's a way to keep it kind of consistent. We're going to put a cap over that. And in that space between the gingerbread and the cap, this space in here, we're going to fill it in with henna paste. Very easy. And that's something that you're starting to see more commonly now in henna. And I think it's a really cool technique because when the henna paste comes off, it looks really, really nice. Now we're going to go in and make some swirls. You want the swirls to be about the same size. Very simple swirls. They do not have to be connected, but they should be close together. Okay? Then we're going to come in with more vertical lines. There's no caps over the swirls, but if you wanted to make a cap over the swirls, you could do that. But in the design in the book, it just comes over with some straight lines. Now let's go ahead and move on to the flower. The flower starts with a simple swirl in the middle that connects with the tip here of our little fishy, I guess you could call it. So it's something very simple like that. Then we're going to do 2 layers of gingerbread. The first layer of gingerbread is a little bit smaller than the second layer, similar to what we did here in the fish, where we have this small layer of gingerbread and then a larger layer. We're going to do the same with the inside of the flower. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, and again over with a larger size gingerbread. I've also called these scallops throughout the video. You can use either name just as long as you remember what it is. Now the petals for this flower are not thicker across the top or thinner on the sides. The line is pretty much consistent through the whole petal. So we're going to try to mimic that as best we can by keeping even pressure on the cone. It does dip slightly at the top, but we're not going to change our pressure. Our pressure is going to be consistent. There is a little space between the petals though, and again we're going to want that space to be about the same between each petal. You don't want a large distance between some petals and then a little bit of distance between the others. Let's continue with this until we're finished. Remember that each petal has a little bit of a dip in the top. If there's anything that you need to review up until this point, please go ahead and rewind the video and restart with me. If not, let's move on to the next part of this design. So now that we're finished with our petals, we're going to go in and put some dots on the inside of the petals. And the dots start at the base. Each petal has 2 dots in it. So here's dot number 1, lift your cone up and drop dot number 2. And we're going to do that on each petal. You don't want to extend the dots all the way to the top because as you can see, there's a little bit of shading or really thin lines that come from the top, so you want to leave space for those. So you don't want your 2 dots to go up too high, you don't want them to be too big. All right, now let's go in with our tiny lines. Now, because we have no caps, we're going to have to squeeze just a little bit of henna paste out onto the tip of our cone and just drag it across the top, creating those really thin lines. Or if you want to do shading, you can just push a little bit of henna paste out onto the tip of your cone and do kind of a scribbling motion instead of a line drawing motion. All right, now that we're done with the little tiny lines, we're going to go ahead and start with the line and dot accents. I really like the line and dot accents in this design because they kind of trace around the outside of the main part of the design, which is that little fishy shape that we did in the beginning. So let's go ahead and do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do the line first and then the dot because it traces along the outside. Coming back over, if you were to do the dot first and then the line, it may not connect properly. However, if you find that doing the dot first and then the line works really well for you, then do that. But I'm going to do it the opposite way. On each side, there are 4 lines with dots for a total of 8 lines with 8 dots. You can do 3 lines, you can do 2 lines, you can do 6 lines if you want, just as long as they fit in the design and they don't change the look of the design. I'm going to go ahead and do 3 or 4 on each side. You want to do the same amount of lines and dots on each side. So that's a thin line with a dot on the tip. And these designs are, the lines are graduated in size. So you want to make the next one shorter than the first one, the one before it. And I'm only going to do 3 on each side, but you can do 4 like in the pattern book, or do less. It's up to you. And you want to make them about the same size on each side. So you don't want really long on this side and then slightly shorter on this side. You want to try to make them look the same if at all possible. All right, so we have a design in this area which kind of reminds me of fleur-de-lis. Basically, we're going to kind of trace here the tops of the swirl area. We're going to come back in here and here, and then we're going to come up kind of like a little arch that comes to a point. I call that the Taj Mahal arch. And then there's filler inside of this. If you find that your cone really doesn't have a thin enough line, then just do as much as the filler as you can. Don't try to fit in too much where it's not going to fit. If you do have a fine tip and you have henna that drapes really, really well, then go ahead and put in the filler that you see in the pattern here. It starts with just a little dot at the base here. Then it has 2 caps over it. The line on my cone is a little bit thick, so I'm going to stop with just that 1 cap. But if you have a really thin line, you can do 2 or 3 caps. And then we come in with a little bit of gingerbread. These are really tiny. Okay, and then it's just swirls. That's it. Very easy, very fun, very nice. Okay, that's it. Very simple, very easy. Now let's go to the top of the flower where we're going to do something very similar. We're going to go ahead and do a swirl here. That's going to touch one side of this petal, and then we're going to do a swirl here that's going to touch this side of the petal. Should be the petal that's right on the top. It's not the one that's right in the middle, but one that meets the pointy part of our fish here, our fish eye. So it's the one that's right above it. So even if you have 4 petals on this side and 2 on the other, it doesn't really matter. This is the petal that you need to do those swirls off of, the one right at the top. All right, we're going to do similar to what we did on the other side. Kind of a fleur-de-lis kind of look. We're going to do this over here. We're going to come back. We're going to do our Taj Mahal little point at the top. And then the filler is similar to what we did before, but instead of just the dot that we started with at the base, this one starts with a swirl at the base. Just a little swirl, nothing too big. And that swirl has 2 caps on it. I'm only going to do 1. You can do 2 if you'd like. Then there's another cap where there's some spacing, and we're going to have vertical lines go in between the 2 caps. Okay? And then the rest is just swirl. Little tiny swirls. I'm working my swirls from the outside in. You can do yours from the inside out. But you don't want to wrap your swirls too many times because this is kind of a tight spot. And when you wrap your swirls too many times, sometimes they all blend together. And then when the design dries and comes off of the skin, it looks like a big blob. And that's something we want to avoid. We want the design to be distinct, and you want to be able to tell what it is that you did. One way that you can accomplish that and not have to worry about it, no matter how thin your henna is to do the outline. Let me show you an example. So this would be the outline, our fleur-de-lis, and this is just going to be a rough draft, so please don't mind if it's not perfect. We would let this dry partially, and then we would go in and fill it in. So we wait just a couple of minutes. The number of minutes is not important. It's when the design starts to crust over, when that outline starts to crust over. That's the important part. Okay? All right, so it looks like we are finished with this design. If you need to review anything, go ahead and rewind the video and restart with me. If you're ready to move on to the next design, let's go ahead and do so. Okay, everyone, let's go ahead and switch over to page number 10. I'm going to show you some of the other designs on page number 10 so you kind of identify which page we're working with. And let's go ahead and get started. This one is similar to a design that we did earlier. It's just a little bit simpler, but let's go ahead and work on this one. Like the others, it starts very basic with a swirl in the middle. So let's go ahead and work with that. Very simple, very easy. I'm working my swirl from the inside out. And that's it. And then it has 1, 2, 3 layers of gingerbread. The first 2 layers of gingerbread are about the same size, and the third layer is just slightly bigger. All right, let's go ahead and do our gingerbread. A question I get a lot is, should my gingerbread connect with the center of my flower? It depends on the design, but in this case, yes, it should connect with that swirl. And let's go ahead on with our second layer of gingerbread. If you need to pause the video to catch up, please feel free to do so. I highly recommend watching the video through just one time and then following along with me. And as always, if you have any questions or you need to review anything, stop the video, rewind it a little bit, and then follow along with me again. Here we are, we've got our 2 layers of gingerbread. Now we're going to come in with our third layer, which is just slightly bigger than the first 2 layers. It may not take 2 gingerbread inside the third layer, but it's just wider. Not necessarily taller than the first 2 layers, just wider. Because we're actually going to put something inside of these. Okay. If you look at the design, there's little dots inside of this third layer of gingerbread. All right. Now that we finished that third layer, let's go ahead and put dots inside each one of those little, what can we call them? Little gingerbreads. The little U's, the little half circles. We're going to put dots, but only in the third layer, not in the first 2 layers. Just the third layer is going to have dots on the inside of the gingerbread. Then we're going to go ahead and start with the first layer of petals. The first layer of petals has the same consistency in the line, meaning it's not thicker through the top or thinner on the sides. It's just the same pressure on the line. So we're going to have consistent pressure, just going to come up and then slightly dips down and then come back down. As you can see, the line is pretty much the same all the way through. It's not thin up the sides, thick up the top, and then thin down the side. No, it's the same pressure all the way through. So let's continue to do that. These petals are touching. There's no distance between these petals. So you can start your next petal off of the side of the previous petal, as I've done. Not only that will that help to make your petal size consistent, but you'll save a little bit of henna that way too. Just a small amount though. And we're just going to go all the way around and do that. And you want the petals to be about the same size. Some can have a deeper dip than others. Some maybe not as deep. But you want them to all be the same height and about the same width. And again, starting your petal off the side of the previous petal will help to keep them consistent in size. So we're going to fit in about 2 more petals here, this being the first and this last one being the second. All right, and on the inside of those we have dots at the base, which we're just going to pop in right there at the base, but in the center of the petal. Very easy, very simple. Okay, and then we're going to drop those really thin lines from the top. Since there aren't any caps on the tops of our petals, meaning a thick line of paste, we're just going to put a little bit of henna paste on the tip of our cone and just draw straight lines. If you don't want to do the straight lines but would rather do shading, you'll start out the same way by putting a little henna paste on the tip of your cone, and that's just squeezing it out, and then just kind of doing a squiggle motion, which on laminated paper doesn't look the same as it does on skin. Shading looks better on skin. Laminated paper, it looks kind of like a scribbly mess. But it's still great practice though. So if you have a laminated template that you can work on, I highly recommend still practicing your shading. You can still practice shading on regular paper as well. So we're going to continue with our thin lines here. And the thin lines don't all have to be the same length. Some can be slightly longer than others. You want to keep them about equal distance apart if you're doing these little lines. If you're just shading, then just go ahead and put your shading in. You don't want to go too far down if you're doing shading. Some parts of your shading can be slightly longer than other parts of your shading if you want to do that. Or you could have your shading be all the same length. That is your personal choice. I just like to do slight variations because then it mimics flowers in nature. So we've pretty much finished with our first round of petals. We're going to go ahead and move on to our second round of petals. Our second round of petals are the same height as the first round, but they're slightly wider. If you look at your template there, you can see. So let's go ahead and start with those. And when I start to apply them, you'll see what I mean by slightly wider. You see? And then these are also connected. There aren't any spaces between these petals. So we're going to continue in the same way as we did the first set. We're just going to make them wider, like so. And once you get the hang of it, designs like these are very easy. If you're just working through it, it should take you anywhere from 5 to 7 minutes. Takes a little bit longer when we're doing a class because I have to explain each and every step and stop and give examples and whatnot. But if I were in a festival environment, this design would probably take about 5 to 7 minutes. If it's taking you anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes to do a design like this, you'll want to keep practicing until you get each and every technique down before you start to do this design professionally. And by each technique, I mean the swirl. Then we want to do the scallops or the gingerbread, as I call them. You're going to want to get your dots down in either your shading or your really thin lines, and then you'll want to be able to do the petals as well. So those are the different techniques that you'll want to have nailed down before you get the design applied very quickly. The difference between these petals and the first set of petals is not only the width. The height is the same, but the width is a little bit wider. We're going to do the really thin lines from the base to the top of the petal. We're not going to connect our lines to the top of the petal though. The first set of petals, we did it from the top of the petal down, but now we're going to draw the lines going outward. They don't all have to be the same length, but they should be equally spaced, and they should not touch this line. They do want to touch this part though, but don't let your lines touch this line. You don't want to connect them. You don't want to draw straight lines all the way through your petal. And in this part, it is a straight line. If you want to change what's in the pattern and do shading, please feel free to do so. But in the pattern, there are straight lines. It's a different type of design because, as you can see in the pattern, there are little dots. You can put little dots in shading, but when the paste comes off of the skin, it kind of looks clumpy. So I don't recommend it. But if you are applying henna to, let's say, a piece of artwork, a piece of wood or canvas or something like that, and you want to put dots in your shading, it really won't make a difference because the henna is going to stay on anyway. All right, so we've got one more petal to go before we come in with just some tiny accent dots that aren't much bigger than the lines themselves. And that's very easy. You just squeeze a little bit of henna paste onto the tip of your cone and just start dropping dots down. You want your dots to be about the same size. Not every line inside the petal needs to have the same number of dots. It doesn't have to have a dot on it. I'm just randomly dropping dots in there, probably not more than 5 or 6. If you want to put more or slightly less, please feel free to do that. And as you can see here, I'm getting the lines dropped, or the dots dropped fairly quickly. You don't need to spend a lot of time on these dots. You really don't. Okay. They should be about the same size. They should not be touching. You shouldn't have a lot of dots on one part of the petal and not a lot of dots on the other part of the petal. You want to just keep them about the same distance apart. Okay. All right, now that we finished that part, we're going to go ahead and move on to the leaves. If there's anything you need to review at this point, go ahead and rewind the video and start over with me. If not, let's go ahead and proceed on to the leaves. Leaves are very easy. It's just one curved line, which many people describe as an S, the letter S, and then just a curved line from the back that connects with the tip of the S. Kind of reminds me of a paisley, but not quite. We're going to do another S on this side. All right, we're going to come out with a line, connect it to the top of the S. These two parts here are going to connect. This and this are going to connect right here at the base. That's how it is in the template, but if you want to do something different, do something different. We're going to do another line in here, and then it just has some straight lines there. Just going to plop some straight lines in there. Nothing too complicated or crazy, right? That's not how we want it. Complicated and crazy is not what we want. We want it easy smeezy, because henna is not hard. It just requires a lot of practice and patience. All right. There we go. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and put a bunch of little swirls in this area here. I'm working my swirls from the outside in. If you want to do yours from the inside out, that's fine. But you want your swirls to be about the same size, and they should touch each other. They should not be on top of each other. They should not overlap, but they should touch. Okay, we're going to do the same thing to the other side. Okay. All right. Fun, fun, fun. Swirls are a really great easy filler, and they're very fast, and they look really impressive when the henna paste comes off the skin. So we've pretty much finished this design, but you can do other things like add little dots around the edges, or you can do, you know, little fancy swirls around the outside, because it does look kind of plain. It's very easy to do. And again, a design like this, once you have all the techniques down, you should be able to apply in about 5 to 7 minutes. Let's go ahead and move on to the last final design. The last and final design is not a style of design that we get to do very often. And it's going to be this flower right here. This is on page 11 of my book. We're going to go ahead and end with page 11, as the designs tend to get a little bit more detailed and complicated as we go on. So to help you identify which page we're working with, go ahead and look for these other designs. We're going to do this one here, which is in the lower right hand corner on page 11. So let's go ahead and get started. I have a hand template here, which is a really great place to put this design, is on the hand, but you can also put it on the foot, the leg, the ankle, the arm, and the back as well. So let's go ahead and start with the stem, which is just a curved line. We'll start out with one curved line. And then we're going to duplicate it and put another one almost right next to it, but it's going to have a little bit of space in between it. All right, kind of drape my line funky right there. Let's clean that up. Using the tip of your cone is a great way to clean up mistakes. Some people use toothpicks or other things. The tip of the cone is also really great for that. All right, and we are going to go ahead and start with the flower, and then we'll put all the other doodads and fun stuff in later. So this is basically how it looks. We're going to have a curve there, a curve there, and this is as wide as our flower is going to get. Then we're going to come in the center, and we're going to do a line very similar, but it's going to be slightly shorter, and we'll do the same on the other side. Then we're going to bring that line in, same on that side, and then we're going to go up and make another point here. Then we're going to bring these in, not to meet the tip, but just to touch the side. just like that. And then let's go ahead and continue with the flower, because this is kind of like the bud part of the flower. We're going to come up with a straight line, and then we're going to kind of go out slightly. And we're going to do the same on the other side. Come up with a straight line and then curve out slightly. Then what we're going to do is do kind of a little floating piece that's going to be all by itself, which is just like this. This is where learning design placement is really important. It kind of dips the top here. Just going to drop that little fact in. This is where design placement is really, really important, because you have to know where each piece of the design is going to fit before you can connect them all. And that's why I kind of chose this design, because it's not very easy, but it's not very complicated either. You might look at it and go, oh, I can do that easily. But there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and put on some petals. Some of these petals are kind of heart-shaped, especially the first one. So the first petal kind of starts out right under the little lip of this little piece that we put here. So we're going to go out, light pressure, heavy pressure over the top, making a cap. We're going to dip down slightly, come back up, and then come back down with light pressure, thinning out the line and connecting it to that shape that we did earlier. And we're going to do the same here. It's going to be a slightly smaller petal though, so we've got thin line coming up. We're going to put more pressure on, making a cap at the top, and then connect it. Move this closer, you can see this little line here is actually from my template, so that is not henna right there. So it's just a petal over the top. If there's any confusion, go ahead and look at what's in your book. Then we're going to go from the other side and do the exact same thing that we've done so far on this side. Okay, we're going to come out, light pressure with a thin line, thicken it as we come around the top, dipping it down a little bit, and the center, coming back up, and then coming down with light pressure with a light line. Okay, and then we're going to make a slightly smaller petal, doing a similar thing. Heavy pressure, dip down, come back up, and then coming down with light pressure, creating a thin line. And then we're going to make that last petal right there in the center with heavy pressure, because we've already got these two lines here from the petals we did previously. From these petals, we've already got these lines, so we just do a cap over the top. Very simple, very easy. Saves you a little bit of henna paste too. And then this comes in with some shading, or you can do really thin lines. In this one, I'm going to do shading like we have in the template or in the ebook, which is just scribbling, basically, which I haven't yet done in this class, but I figured I'd save it for the last design. So you can see on the template, it looks kind of funny, but on skin, it looks just fine. And on regular paper, it looks fine too. Okay, so we've done that. This piece here in the middle doesn't have any shading in it, but we do have some shading here. Just like that. Then we're going to go in and kind of fill this in, but not 100% though. It's kind of like shading, but with heavy pressure, so you get a lot more color than you do with the petals that we did. But it's not exactly 100% filled in, but it is shading with really heavy pressure. All right, now let's go ahead and start with the really fun doodads on the side of the stem of this flower. You can either start from the top and then work your way to the bottom. Let's bring the design back so I can explain what I'm talking about. So you can start doing these things and work your way to the bottom, or you can start at the bottom and work your way to the top. I'm going to start at the bottom and work my way to the top, just so I can fit everything that I want to fit in. Not all of these little doodads may fit in. So it starts with a swirl at the bottom of the stem on each side. So let's go ahead and do that. You can work both sides at the same time, or work one side at a time. I prefer to do both sides at the same time, but that's just a personal preference. You don't have to do it that way. Then we have a slightly looser swirl, and I'll do that. like so. And we've got kind of little spear-shaped things here. And they are graduated in size. Okay. Then we kind of have a little flowery looking thing. It's just like that. And then let's fill that in. It does have a little circle. You can kind of make a circle with the tip of your cone. But just fill it in and then make a little circle on the inside. Just, I'll show you here what I mean. By just moving your henna paste inside that solid henna there, and then it kind of creates a circle. I'm going to go ahead and fill that part back in because we don't want a circle there. And then we're going to come with a line. And then as we get to the end of that line, we're just going to put a couple of dots, one right after another, touching each other. They should be graduated in size, meaning they go from big dots to small dots. But they all are touching. We're going to do the same on the other side. Like so. We're going to come in with a couple of more spears. The first set being slightly shorter than the next set we're going to do, also known as graduated in size. Very fun, very easy. We're going to do some more of these. Thin lines with dots, graduated in size, meaning the dots get slightly smaller as we work our way out to the tip. But they should be touching each other. And then we're going to do swirlies, like we did at the base. And that is it. Very simple, very easy. This is a really fun design that should take you about 5 to 7 minutes to do, not including any explanation time and breaking down the design kind of time. If you need to review any parts of this design, please go ahead and rewind the video and start over with me. That is our final design for today. I encourage you to continue to work your way through the ebook, learning the techniques that we've learned thus far, and practicing other designs. Thank you so much for participating in the class, and feel free to follow up with any questions at freehandmehndi@gmail.com. Thank you very much.